So good morning, good afternoon, um, good evening from Rome. Thank you very much for the invitation and the introduction. And mostly thank you also to all who are present here and show their interest in this topic. We talk about safeguarding. As has already been mentioned, this is a term that is used since a number of years to describe a holistic approach in the sense of keeping people safe in the church, in its institution, and in families and in society at large. My major point for you from KOLPING International and from KOLPING families around the globe is that we do something that belongs to the gospel when we try to keep people safe. This is part and parcel of the mission of the church. In fact, we shouldn't need to talk about it because ideally, what we talk about would be the normal thing, would be something that we don't need to underline because everybody knows about it and everybody follows it. I do think it is the norm in the sense of most people in most occasions act in the church and outside the church in a way that keeps others and themselves safe. Most people do that, I believe. But there are also occasions, structures, and persons who don't keep people safe. And that is why we need to talk about it. So I want to start with this icon, which is a gift from friends when we moved into our new office space here in Rome from the Pontifical Gregorian University to another building because we needed more space for our Institute of Anthropology's office. So friends gifted this icon to us as a sign of where is our heart, where it should be, what is motivating, what is giving us scope, and what gives us energy in who we are as Christians, as researchers, as teachers, as people engaged in the mission of the church. And I asked a Ukrainian artist to write, as we say, to write the icon. According to the traditional Byzantine motif of Jesus, creator of safe and sacred space, Jesus Christ, Savior, Redeemer, Healer. And the traditional motif shows three people who have been healed by Jesus, who is in the middle, of course, and who reaches out to the person on the right hand, who is the leper, the woman at the feet of Jesus is the hemorrhaging woman who has been healed. And on the left-hand side, you see the paralytic with his bed, and he can walk, so he's also been healed. This is the traditional motive of Jesus the healer in iconography. I asked the artist also to include a woman with her two children who ask Jesus to look at them, to protect them, to be aware of them, of their needs, of their vulnerabilities. So this is the expression of why we are here today, why we talk about safeguarding, why we try to do better, always try to do better, even in the face of our own negligence, of our own limitations, of our own sinfulness. The motivation is simply that Jesus in the gospel heals people who have been wounded, have been marginalized, have been put on the sideline of life, have been accused of sinfulness, of harm, and who Jesus brings back into the community of the believers and brings them back also into their health, psychological, physical, spiritual health. So this is, for me, a very important point of reference for all what we try to do in whatever capacity, in whatever role, in whatever function we have, in whatever mission we try to fulfill within the church, and for you particularly as members of KOLPING. So we don't invent things. We don't need to invent orientation and motivation. It is already there in the gospel, in Jesus Christ, who calls us to do as he has done, especially in reference to people who have been wounded and have experienced marginalization and feelings of guilt, feelings of shame. They have been victims of disease, of allegations of marginalization. So when we come to the word safeguarding, I'm aware that even in English, it is not a term that is clearly defined. However, the advantage of this, that it is not clearly defined, is that you can fill such a concept with elements of definition. And the definition I want to give to safeguarding is the creation, or better, the co-creation of safe space, the living out of safe relationships, and the implementation of safe practices and processes. Now, we could go on for hours, if not days, in delving into what do all these concepts mean. Of course, we can't go on for long within the time that has been set, but I just want to give a few further details to what safe space means. Safe space is where we live, where we work, is buildings, is institutions, is, however, today also, especially for younger people, but not only, the digital space, the internet. So when we talk about safe space, we need to realize that it is the physical, let me say, the analog world, and it is the digital world. And we need also to know that safe space means something different in East Timor, in Germany, in Malawi, and in Mexico. It is different, the definition, what I consider, if I live in any of these countries, as a safe space. There are cultural differences that we need to really acknowledge. The same is true for safe relationships. Safe relationship means, first and foremost, that I respect the dignity, the value of the other person or persons, and that I don't abuse of them. I don't use them for my own purposes, for my own needs. I keep the boundaries, the sound and healthy boundaries, and I acknowledge the worth and the dignity of the other person. Now, how I express that, how I live it out in concrete relationships, that is different from country to country, from continent to continent, from culture to culture. Um, like, for example, how we greet each other, how we touch each other, how we criticize each other is very different in Vietnam, in the Philippines, in India, and in Chile or in Kenya. So there are differences how we greet each other, how we address each other, how we call each other. But in each cultural context, you also know, intuitively and expressly know what it looks like to be in a safe relationship. Then safe practice and process means basically to be consistent with between what we say and what we do. Uh, you have already been referred to a lot to guidelines and laws and safety concepts and so forth. They are important. The most important question, however, is whether this is something that is really implemented or it becomes a tick off exercise where you develop your guidelines and your safety concepts, and it is not really um, it is not really implemented. It is simply an exercise of showing off, of church washing, safe washing, as we say. You do something just to comply with the norms that come from the donors, or in this case, also from KOLPING International, that obliges you to come up with your own guidelines, but it is a dead letter. It is not really taken seriously. It is something that you put on the shelves. The same is true for church law. The same is true for civil state law. If it remains at the level of simply repeating what the words say without really doing it, putting it in practice, it's not a safe practice. So I think it's important to realize that safeguarding is an open concept. It can be given elements of definition, as I do here, but it also needs to be applied to your respective context and culture. So there is no one size fits all definition, and there is no one size fits all resolution in this. However, there is the need, therefore, there is the need that you define for yourself, means for your institutions, for your situation of law in your respective country, for the type of cultural context, social, political context, to define what does safe space, safe relationships, safe practices and processes mean for you and your work in your institutions. So there is the necessity to go beyond simply copy and paste, to copy from somebody else what they understand as safe space relationships. You can take some orientation and direction from others and from other guidelines or processes in other countries, but ultimately you need to implement that and to make it understandable for your context and constitution. Um, so, what I would like to say also is that safeguarding understood in this sense is going beyond guidelines, which we need, sure, but it is something that should be presented as giving life and allowing for growth and for allowing for community. So I think it's important for all of us and also for the church that we realize that safeguarding is not something heavy or shouldn't be heavy or shouldn't be depressing. It is something that opens space for life and for growth. So I've been asked to present also on the situation in the church worldwide. And what I can say from travel to many parts of the world, which I undertook over the last 20 years or so, the topic nowadays is present everywhere. And even if people say we don't have to deal with it, they say it publicly, but then in private they come and tell you, no, 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 we surely we have to really reckon with it, and we have also our challenges in it. In for me, it was a discovery over the last years that people really don't like to talk about it, and therefore they become unwilling to engage. The discovery was this that it is normal and it is understandable that people don't like this topic many times because they think it's all about scandals, it's all about wrongdoings, crimes, sins, and whatever you have. So there is generally an uncomfortableness when you bring this up. And all the more it is important that we talk about the positive and the motivating side of safeguarding. Please take this into consideration when you talk about it and when you bring it up. Now, when it comes to the Catholic Church worldwide, I, I, I really dare to say that the church is doing relatively well in many places, in many parts of the world, when it comes to safeguarding measures. What I mean is, for example, something like we do today on a Saturday. For many of us, it would be a free day on weekend, and like here in Rome, there's beautiful sun. So if spring is coming, but we are here to dedicate time, to dedicate energy and our interest and commitment to this educational seminar on safeguarding. Not many religions, not many denominations, not many government or other officials would do that and dedicate that amount of time and that type of energy and commitment. And from all what I know and I have seen with my own eyes in many parts of Africa, Asia, Latin America, and other parts of the Catholic Church, we do relatively well in keeping people safe nowadays in our parishes, in our schools, in our universities, in our workplaces, in our communities. We do relatively well. Relatively means it's not perfect and it won't ever be perfect. And relatively means it could be better, yes. But this is an ongoing process and an ongoing purification and conversion process. However, I would say thumbs up for safeguarding measures across the globe. That does not mean it's very well done in every place, but at least all over, I would contend that safeguarding measures are done well in the Catholic Church. What is counterproductive, however, is that we don't do well when it comes to dealing with the past, with acknowledging the crimes and the sins that have been committed against vulnerable people, most and foremost children, adolescents, and other vulnerable persons or persons in situations of vulnerability. And this is something that really hampers our positive response and takes away the credibility of our safeguarding measures. as long as we don't really acknowledge and recognize the harm that has been done by clergy and non clergy in church institutions against people who were entrusted to us or had trust in church representatives, as long as we don't acknowledge that, much of what we do in safeguarding measures will be questioned and will be seen as something that makes up for too many, too grievous deeds, actions of people who were seen as representatives of God, be they clergy or non clergy. So, what I also have realized over the years is that there is relatively little transfer of experience and expertise. And that is something that an organization like KOLPING could help to change. And what we are doing here, I believe, is also meant to change this. We need to talk to each other. We need to exchange our views, our expertise, our knowledge about it, because we are together in this boat. Nobody's an island, as Thomas Merton said. No community, no Kolping family is an island. No membership in one local church is isolated from the neighboring local church. So we could make much more of what we can contribute to each other's experience and knowledge, and therefore it could be a really important mission of the church as such to humanity if we were more capable of exchanging and collaborating in this issue as in other issues, which does not mean precisely that there is a one size fits all approach. No, it can't be. I have already mentioned in some instances until now that I do believe that there are cultural, legal, historical, political, whatever factors that makes it impossible to apply one rule, one guideline, one safety policy, whatever, to all institutions in the church and all communities and all parishes. And so there is no one size fits all. Again, the good side is that there is the possibility to enter into a cultural context. The challenging side is that we need to find out what that means. How do we spell out safeguarding, not only language wise, in the thousands of languages that we speak in the church, but also how do we spell it out in symbols, in procedures, in teaching material, in guidelines, and whatever you have. So, what is also important, and Mrs. Stapel has already mentioned that there have been changes over the last, let me say, almost 10 years now. Until then, until 2017, there was a lot of talk about abuse of children, adolescents, and it was the main focus or almost exclusive focus for the church and society. Since 2017, the focus has also included the abuse of adult persons in situations of vulnerability. Like the Me Too movement in the US, starting in the US in 2017, brought into the picture the abuse of women in film industry or in sports in situations of vulnerability who had been abused grievously. Then other groups of people beyond children have come to into the focus. Indigenous, people with disabilities, LGBTQ people, elderly, immigrants or migrants, women religious, seminarians. Ultimately, in church and in research institutions or publications, we talk also a little bit more about another taboo topic, sexual abuse committed by women. While till very recently, there was very little attention to given to women perpetrators of abuse. Now, uh, I'm not sure, as was said before, how many of you work with children. I believe almost all your work will be with adult or adolescent people, but in any case, in the church and in society at large, the focus has shifted and includes now not only safeguarding of children, but also safeguarding of adult persons in situations of vulnerability. A second shift has taken place. Um, as I said, until 2017 and 18, there was a main focus on children and sexual abuse of children. Since 2017-18, the focus has also included, besides sexual abuse, physical, psychological, emotional, verbal, and spiritual abuse, the question of neglect of people who are entrusted to our care has come up. And surely we need to talk more about the huge opportunities for abuse that the internet world has created. In addition, nowadays, also with the ever more pervasive use of artificial intelligence tools, which make it very, for example, make it very easy for people to create sexual images or videos of children or persons in situations of vulnerability, so that these are abusive images, and we have not yet found a way how to define and how to fight this type of online abuse. Um, for the church, there is another question that has drawn much attention over the last 10 years or so: the abuse of power. Many victims state that it was not the sexual interaction or the psychological or spiritual abuse that they suffered which made them hurt more. It was the abuse of power, which they describe as the root cause of all other types of abuse. And it's interesting to see that not in the Catholic Church, not in other Christian denominations, and not in other religions, there is a lot written and researched about what does power mean, how do we live out power in a constructive, in a positive, in an empowering way, or when it turns into abuse of power. So, and you, in for your work, I believe, in some places at least, safeguarding will also need to be explained and lived out in times of extreme challenges in society, for the state, for the social situation in general. When you live in war zones where there is civil unrest, where there is extreme poverty, or where natural catastrophes have made it very difficult to live and to relate to each other. So, what I just want to say is that, again, safeguarding is something that needs to be applied to the concrete situation. It doesn't make sense to wash one's hands in innocence when saying that we have completely different problems in our country, in our context. You Westerners, you don't understand in what situation we live. Um, yeah, the situations surely are challenging. The question is, how do we really keep up the principle of safeguarding, and how do we help people to live it out in a more consistent way? Um, Living out safeguarding in a consistent way means that we look also at uh, the relatedness of the different aspects of our life. Now, and this is called a systemic approach. A systemic approach looks at the system please be aware that I don't talk about systematic approaches, which would mean one, two, three analysis, learning, and then decision. This is a systematic approach. We need a systematic approach, sure. But what I want to highlight here is that we need to look at a systemic view. System is a family, a parish, the Kolping family, the institution, a school, a boarding house, etc., etc. This is a system. The church as a whole is also a system. And any system has four components. One is people, second is structures, third is processes, and fourth is content. Now, let us talk about one institution like a school. You have people, you have the teachers, you have the students, you have the fathers and mothers of the students, you have the employees of the school, etc. The structures means you have classes, you have a school building, you have different types of rooms, the gym and the room for chemistry and physics and whatever, for art. You have structures also in the sense of the board of trustees or the meeting of the teachers at the end of the year for the marks. You have structures like unions and so forth. Then you have processes. Now, in a school, you have the teaching, of course, but you have also the selection process of students. You have the way how marks are brought about. You have exams, you have discussions on the marks among the teachers, and so forth. And finally, the content for a school means, of course, what is taught, but also what a church, what a school as such tries to convey in written text or orally or simply by doing, by showing, by symbolizing. So you could go and analyze your own institutions, your own families, your structures, and go into detail in describing what your system, the larger or the smaller system in which you operate, defines as the people, the structures, the processes, and the content of your subsystem. Then, of course, you could go to see how the subsystems inside Kolping come together and create a bigger system, which is then the Kolping family worldwide, and how the Kolping family then fits into the church worldwide. So we are all in subsystems operating at the same time also in different subsystems. But my point here is that we need to realize that in any system, there you create a mentality and you live out a mentality. For example, if Kolping is as such, your institution and Kolping family in your country and Kolping family all over the globe is open to transparency, to accountability, to taking responsibility for victims of abuse and for prevention of abuse and for creation of safe space, then this helps the mentality and informs the attitudes of each member. And if you wish, you can also say the attitude of any institution. Are we, for example, are we sensitive to the harm that has been done to victims? And how do we help them to voice their concerns, their harm? How do we provide justice and reconciliation? So you need to work on all four elements if you want to come to a change of mentality and attitudes. If you just change structures or processes, but you don't change people and content, the danger is that you talk a lot about safeguarding, but it's not really influencing and motivating a change of mentality and an application of attitudes. How does that work? Of course, as I said, we need guidelines, we need policies, we need practices. So we need to come from general rules and principles to the adaptation to specific institutions so that they become lived out policies and practices. So the way how habitually we go forward in organizing our activities, whatever that is, teaching and receiving people and creation of learning spaces and so forth and so forth. So if that is a process that is connecting the theoretical, the legal, the binding guidelines and translates that in policies and practices, you change mentality. If you focus only on the guidelines level and you remain on the theory level, the lived practice cannot really have an effect. So whatever we do in writing and in discussing, in setting up and promulgating guidelines needs to really then lead to lived practice and implementation of practices. And for such a change of mentality to happen, it's important to realize that safeguarding and safeguarding um, ministry will not go away. We will have to deal with this for all our lifetime, and for the current situation, it's better to face the reality. This is not something that will die out, especially because we need to realize that human frailty and human sinfulness and human guilt will always produce types of abuse. It has been there from the beginning. Look only to the first chapters of Genesis, Adam and Eve, and Cain killing his brother, and so forth. So it has always been there. Violence has been there from the beginning, and it will be there. So it's better to face reality. And to realize that I can do something. Even if you feel and you describe yourself and you define yourself only as a little wheel in a big machinery, and who cares about this little person who is a little school director or a little leader of the KOLPING family here and there. What can I do? Yes, you can do something. You are empowered to do something in your capacity, in your role. Nobody needs to save the world. The world has already been saved. We believe that Jesus has already saved the world. What we do with all what we can in the limits of our roles, our competencies, our capabilities, our situations is what is in our hands. Not more, not less. If everybody did what he or she can do, should do, in her role, in his capacity, in their competences, then a lot will change. And I do believe that if all the groups and movements in the church, including KOLPING, do what they can do to promote safeguarding, a lot will change over time. For that, it's important to realize that safeguarding is not an isolated specialization. We need people like Frau Stapel and other safeguarding personnel, and our institute here in Rome forms, educates safeguarding personnel, as we call them, the safeguarders for movements, for local churches, for dioceses, for religious communities, for Catholic schools. We do that, yes, and we need specialists. But all of us, each single person who is now on the call here, needs to realize that safeguarding is an integral part of our mission, the pastoral, the educational, the spiritual, the social. And we do this, as I said before, we do it either together or we don't do it. It's a community commitment. If we really live up to that, then and only then we will have a culturally adapted and effective safeguarding. So I want to conclude with a few spiritual aspects because I feel that it is important to really highlight that. When we talk about it, very often we don't realize that this is not only a psychological or a legal issue, it's also a spiritual issue. So, how do we deal with the power in our hands, in our institutions, in our roles? What is the self image that we want to promote for the church, which in many parts of the world discovers its weakness and um, discovers itself with less and less power? But is that so bad? Is the fear of scandal leading us? Avoid uh, showing a bad face of the church is for many the 11th commandment. The 11th commandment is don't create scandal. While we don't realize that the biggest scandal comes afterwards when people discover that we have shown a double face and we have played a double game. How do we live out sexuality? How do we talk about it in our different cultural environments? Um, what do we do with our fear of vulnerability and the difficulty to admit crimes and sins? Do we apply what we say for individual confession, that remorse and clear confession and the willingness to repair damage that is the elements of the sacrament of reconciliation or confession? Do we apply that not only to us individually, but do we talk about it and apply it also to our institutions and the church as a whole? And how do we own our own responsibility and our accountability, which is for many countries and in many places, also in the Catholic Church, a word that is not really accepted and lived out: accountability. I have to take responsibility for what I have done and for what I omitted to do, even if I was obliged to do officially. And what are the institutional and personal consequences for that? So, these are a few aspects that bring us back to the one who is the inspiration for our work and for these words. Jesus is the creator of safe space and sacred space. He invites us to co create that space for those who are in situations in vulnerability and need our special attention and accompaniment. And I really commend KOLPING for bringing up this topic and to invite people to engage in it. I also want to say that I'm inviting all of you to consider also learning more about it. And one possibility is to come to our institute's training, which is a 1 semester training in English, a 2 semester training in Spanish. And for those who want to really go deeper, also a 2 years program, a full academic master program recognized by the church as a full degree or doctorates in this area. And there's another thing that I want to mention in this commercial break that is now on. In June, from 16 to 19 June, we have the International Safeguarding Conference here at our Gregorian University, precisely to talk about the cultural aspects of safeguarding and the intercultural learnings, so that we are really more sensitive and more knowledgeable about the different cultural components that live among people on one continent or from one continent to another or even within one country. So thank you for your attention, and you have also the presentation as it has been sent out to you. And I'm just stopping here now the presentation mode and give back to Mrs. Stapper.